The life cycle and stages of a congregation. Basically, if you take the VRPM, the Vision, the Relationship Program Management, you can determine by examining and talking, from a dialogue standpoint. Remember that generative dialogue thing. As you dialogue within the life of the church and you generate a deeper understanding of who we are and what we're doing, you can begin to track and see where you are. Now that I've handed that out, everybody's going to be looking at that. And so if you remember, vision is vision, leadership, mission, purpose, core values. The R is relationships, experiences, discipleship. P, programs, events, ministries, services, and activities. And M is management, accountability, systems, and resources. In the early life of the church, basically, you're probably going to find yourself, as you look at this, you're probably going to find yourself up to phase 2. How many of you are within 6 months to 2 years of starting your church? We got 1, 2, 3. How many of you are around 3 to 5 years? Okay. Anybody 6 to 10 years out? Okay, so we got a pretty new group. How many of you are in the incubation period? How many of you are still in the womb? Okay, we'll count you there. But as you look at this, all 4 of these are always present in the life of the church, to some degree. They're always present to some degree. But as you can see here on your chart and right here, just kind of a quick one, when they're capitalized, that means they're heavily emphasized, that they take a lead role in the life of the church. So in the birth kind of stage, that kind of 6 months to 2 years, vision is preeminent. I mean, vision is the key. That is what is driving the church. Relationship program management, they're there, but they're not necessarily prominent in what they do. Does that make sense? I mean, think about your own experience and where you are. If you've ever been a part of a new church or started that, what that was like. You remember how you cast vision, and you don't know how to manage yourselves. You don't have really kind of critical. You don't have any programs, and you really probably don't have that many people yet. As you grow into infancy, the relationships become important, and you begin to add some kind of components there. So, in addition to vision, your relationships become important. Because what's one of the key things you're involved in, in the early stages of your church? Do what? Visioning. And then out of that visioning comes what?
Relationship.
People. You start getting people. Because you're doing what? You're doing evangelism.
Exactly.
And you've got, all of a sudden you got these people and you start talking about discipleship and you start talking about relating to the world. And so relationships become very important. So much so that people love those smaller groups. In fact, sometimes you can get stuck there because people just like each other so much. They like the relationships, they like the intimacy, they like being in one group, and so it's really, you have issues as you go through these life cycles of how to break through. But relationships are very important in this early stage. As you move along that lifeline there, once you have the people, relationships start to take a back seat because of the people, you have to develop what for them? Programs. So you spend kind of a season instituting programs and trying to get those up and running. What are we going to do with our kids? What are we going to do with our small groups? What are we going to do with our discipleship? And you start kind of trying to institutionalize a little bit more programs to facilitate the relationships. And the fascinating thing is you have adolescence is coming, right? And you're going to have some conflict that happens. This adolescence is probably the most conflicted stage of the church because you have people here who come to your church because of the vision and the relationships that are made. And that's why they're there. They love the relationships, they love the people, they love the small groups, they love the fact that you only have one worship. We, in Frisco, how many of you know Chuck Swindoll, right? Chuck Swindoll? Yeah, most of you probably do. He started the church in Frisco. It was like big mega church, big honking thing over there. We always got people that would come to us because they would go to this, just mass of people, and they were like, we want something more intimate. And I used to love that until we got, toward adolescence, and we were starting in our programs because you have people that come because of your programs too, in that third phase, right? They come because they like your kids' programs, or they come because they like what you're doing in discipleship, or they come because you like what you're doing reaching out in the community. And then as they merge into adolescence, you have 2 different kind of groups that are coming together, right? Those who came when things were small and relational, and those who came when things were programmatic. And so that's when you start to have a lot of conflict. And as I kind of reflect on my time, and this is what made it so powerful for me when I was listening to George talk through this, I'm like, well, duh. No wonder we were having so many issues. No wonder we get to this point we have so much conflict. And it makes so much sense once you start to kind of understand they'll tell you that the people you start with within 5 to 10 years have cycled out and are gone.
Yeah.
They're not there anymore. And I went, oh, that's BS. I can keep them. Because I have a Messiah mentality. I'll be different. And, by 5 or 6 years, we were starting to lose those people we started with. And, it was very painful for some of the people we started with, and they were still there, and they lamented, and they grieved over their loss. And, I went, well, they told me that we would lose them after about 5 to 6 years. And I didn't believe them. But it makes more sense now as I see this, that they came under this vision and because of the relationships. And as the church grew and matured and changed and became more programmatic, and that it wasn't the same thing they came to. And all of a sudden we had 2 worship services, or we had, they didn't have the same feel for them, and so they tended to leave, and you saw that turnover. As you move into adolescence, your vision, your relationship program are doing great, and by adulthood you've added, supportive, flexible management systems to be able to support what you're doing. And adulthood, is about that 18 to 25-year-old range. And that's when you're hitting on all cylinders. That's when the church is really rocking and doing some good things. And
Is that where pastors burn out?
that's where you see a lot of change. Yeah, that's where pastors say, hey, if you make it 18 years in a new church development, God bless you. Talk to Glenn, because he's one of a few out there. Glenn McDonald, who's a pastor here at Zionsville. I think he's been in 25 years, but I made it like 9. He needs to leave right away. Do what now?
He needs to leave right away before the other's out of the chart.
That's right. Well, he may already be on the other side of the chart. And there's no shame in going over. I mean, if you look at the chart, that prime area that you want churches to stay in is kind of this cycle from adulthood to maturity and redeveloping forward back into adulthood. Because what happens as you move over the hill, so to speak, you still look great. I mean, the relationship program, everything looking good. You're rocking along still, but something's missing, and you can hear it kind of in the talk that people say, we used to have a real clear direction. Something just seems to be missing right now. You can't tell from the way things look, but things just don't seem to be the same. There's not a clear direction. There's not as much passion. Something's missing, and what's missing is the vision. The lack of vision. So, and then obviously as it goes down, you have, when you hit empty nest, you try to reinforce relationships, and there are like 3 stages to empty nest. There's nostalgia, disappointment, and anger. People long for the old days. They start going, well, if we just get back to, then we'd be better off. And then when that doesn't happen, you hit that disappointment thing where people say, well, if everybody was as dedicated as me, we could do this. And then that leads to the anger, and people become angry and frustrated and mad. And then in retirement, you start thinking, well, if we just did more programs, if we could emphasize our programs again, then we could get back. And by the time you're in old age, it's in bad shape.